Shipwrecked 64 is a game that you may recognize. For those who don't know, Shipwrecked is a horror game where you play this old game that was removed from the shelves quickly for an unknown reason. But as time went by, someone was able to bring back Shipwrecked 64 in all of its glory. You have two options. Play the 2023 version, where the game is altered and more, well, friendly. Or you can play the 1997 version, where there's barely any alterations. As you dig deeper in this version, there are horrifying creatures looking for you, and puzzles that require you to think outside of the box. Now that you have some context, I'd recommend playing the game to get the story of this game. And you should be gone anytime now. Go play the game, goofy goober. The Steam link is in the description. Okay, but let's actually get into this now. When I show these images to you, what do you see in it? Do you see beauty in it? Or do you see fear in it? What I see is someone that's been through multiple things. Someone that knows things that we don't even know. I see a husk that is haunted by the many tortured souls. This is the Husk. He made his first appearance back in Shipwrecked 64 Legacy Edition, but there's not much to say about that version of the game when it comes to Husk content. But there is a lot to say in the full game of Shipwrecked 64. You may spot him watching you throughout the game, but you really need a good eye to even see him. He's most easy to see when you're playing the Mark Mullins tape, since he surrounds the room. But his most notable appearance is when a cutscene plays. It starts off with a person describing the site of the studio grounds Husk. He stands still like a statue. That is until he suddenly moves. Before anything else happens, Husk corrupts the footage and speaks directly towards us. Sorry for the random pause, but in the beginning of the intro, well, when Husk corrupts it, he says something, it's you. I don't know what he's saying in there, maybe I'm overthinking this, but I don't know if he's saying someone's name, but if you know what it is, or just want to take a shot in the dark, honestly, feel free to tell me in the comments. But back to the cutscene, Husk states that he thought he was the only one rotting down here. He talks about how the 4 starlings are connected to him: Brandon, Olivia, Nathan, and Gary. Husk then gives us an offer. If we want to learn the truth, then we have to find him 10 times. After that, you are taken to a darker realm of the Nulla Terra. It is called the Nulla Terra Remnant. We are put on a hunt to go find Husk 10 times whilst being hunted at the same time. Once we complete his tasks, Husk gives his final words before showing us the truth about the development of Shipwrecked 64.
Ask, and you shall receive. Let's take a look at the little mess you've made.
Now there's one more thing I need to show before we exit Shipwrecked 64. There's a secret where, as far as I'm aware, no one has really talked about, but I can't help but find this interesting. If you dig deep into the game, you'll run into a specific scene where Husk talks to Bucky, the one we're playing as. Here, take a listen.
Isn't it strange, Bucky? Everything that happened to these people, it has some scary resemblance to your friends, does it not? What did you do? I already know. You gotta figure that out still.
This monologue really portrays Husk as an all-knowing entity, and is perhaps something that we should be afraid of. He may not deliberately attack us, but that doesn't mean that it isn't violent. He probably is just patient, but as far as I'm aware, that is all for Husk's appearance in Shipwrecked 64. But we still have some other appearances to talk about. there is a YouTube channel that goes by the name of Gavin. He seems to archive stuff from Studio Grounds, and the archives we are focusing on are the Studio Tunes hijacks. The first one has the camera panning to Husk whilst in a forest or something related to nature. While this is playing, Husk says, "Our world is vast. It's self-sufficient, and it will keep turning, with or without you." 1996, July 11th, stay inside. What Husk is practically saying is that our world is huge and it's self-reliant. He states that the world will keep on going, whether you're alive or dead. He then threatens the viewers about an event happening on July 11th, 1996. This can be associated with the certain event called the Great Stampede. We do not know much about the event, but we do know that it happens in Studio Grounds, which causes it to close for a few months. This would imply that the Husk played a major role for the Great Stampede and caused Studio Grounds to close indirectly, or maybe directly. We still don't know what entirely happened in the inside of the Great Stampede. On to the next hijack. Husk says, "You want a reason to scream? I can give you a reason to scream." Right after that, we see blood coming out of Bucky. And finally, Husk says, "We are all temporary," while Husk stands there. And that's all from Husk's history for now, but I should address something before I speculate the Husk. You're likely wondering why he looks so different compared to the Shipwrecked 64 game, and that is because he got a remodel. So do not be surprised when the models of the Shipwrecked cast are different. So now that we know Husk's history, what is his story? Well, luckily, we have somewhat of an idea. With the help of this note from the aquarium in Layer 4, this gives us heavy implications on the origin of Husk. The note says this: "In 1995, there was a mass made of 4 men. 3 men and 1 woman to be exact. It sat in a room, waiting for its liberation. That would not come for years. The mass of 4 men sat in a room. It writhed and twitched like a dying animal, but it was still very much alive. It craved freedom, liberation, and happiness. It begged, pleaded to leave, but it was held in that room for a long time. One day, though, when checked upon, the mass was missing. It shambled, pulling itself out of the room. When it was far enough away from the building, it split right in half. The 2 halves went their separate way. The 3 men and 1 woman perfectly fits Brandon, Nathan, Gary, and Olivia. So Husk is 100% connected to the dead performers. I believe this to be about how Vandal and Husk came to be. Husk does state that he has a connection to the Starlings in some sense, so that would explain the bizarre looks. They're not inherently meant to be mascot performers. They were just a mask that was rotting down in a room. While Vandal went out of his way to harass Mark Mullins, Husk seemingly stayed in Broadside Beach, watching from a distance. It got to the point where people spotted this thing. It's very much worth noting that Vandal's official YouTube channel, JD from Bullet's End, has Husk with the YouTube banner, but I'm left with a few questions. One being, how and why did Husk make his way to Shipwrecked 64? Because I'm pretty confident that it's Husk himself with the way he acts within the game. Maybe I'm overthinking this, but surely there was a rhyme or reason for this. And then Husk's origin states that it's back in 1995, how there was a mass and it was locked away for years. But then we have the Great Stampede and how it was seemingly back in 1996. And Husk is likely involved with that incident. So that wouldn't be years of the mask being locked up, because notice how the Cogware note heavily emphasizes the mask being trapped for a long time, years? Well, that wouldn't really be years, just more rather a year. This is an inconsistency that I noticed, but I could be not getting the full picture. But to summarize what we know, a mass of Brandon, Nathan, Gary, and Olivia was a thing back in 1995. It was locked out for a bit and wanted out. After a while, the mass escaped the building and split into two, creating the Husk and the Vandal. Husk would be watching studio grounds from a far distance. Some people noticed that this entity would be there, standing there, doing nothing. In 1996, Husk hijacks the Studio Tunes broadcast to threaten the viewers about July 11th, 1996. When the day came, the Great Stampede happened. The event led to Studio Ground closing for a couple of months. Finally, in 1997, Shipwrecked 64 would be made, and Husk was in the video game, stalking the player and directly confronting the player to find him 10 times in order to know the truth. And that's about the gist of it. This section is mainly for me to talk about extra stuff that wouldn't really fit in the grand scheme of the video, so I gave it its own section. But if you want to skip through the intro, then you are absolutely free to, because I'm gonna yap. Just something for me to info dump about the character I really like. So, with Husk's new model, you can clearly see something behind that bag, cloth, or whatever it is. I mean, the creator of Husk's model, Poisonous Pastel, said not quite with me asking if it's his eye, so I guess it ain't the dude's eyes. I don't know. There's something behind that, that's all I know. And then we have Shipwreck's creator saying that there's more Broadside Beach stuff that is like undiscovered at the moment. He stated that there's like Husk related stuff to it, so, and yeah, that caught my attention, and no one has really solved this loose end as far as I'm aware. So if anyone wants to give this a shot and figure out what this Broadside Beach Husk mystery is, go ahead, be my guest. And then you have Husk's Twitter account. It's fan-made, let me just say that right now, but I want to talk about it. This account is weird as hell. This thing creeps me out. Like, it deliberately acknowledged me. Like that. Like what you're seeing right now. And then you got this. And this. And then this. Ninja Blevins. Okay. I think I got all of this out of my chest. Let's go to the outro now, shall we? So, that's all for my video, but before I go, I want to heavily emphasize on how y'all should check out these cool stuff. They were very handy in researching the lesser known areas of Shipwrecked, so I'd highly recommend that you support these lovely things, or at least just give them a check. They are very helpful for those who are desperate to be caught up with the lore. Also, go support Shipwrecked as a series. You know, go to Squeak's Patreon, or buy Shipwrecked 64 on Steam, that would be pretty awesome. But nonetheless, this has been DJ Aiden, and I'll see y'all on the flip side. Or would the flip side be Nula Terra Remnants? Whatever, flip side.